The jungle was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan had been walking for hours. The tall alien trees around him swaying slowly in the warm breeze. The leaves were thick and green, blocking most of the sunlight. So the forest floor stayed dim and cool. He carried a small pack on his back, heavy with supplies meant for a human outpost far beyond the hills. This path was rarely used. Only traders or soldiers passed through, and Ethan was neither. Just a man doing his job. Still, he kept his hand close to the pistol on his belt, because on this world, the forest could turn deadly in seconds. A sound broke the silence. It was faint, almost lost in the rustling of leaves. It sounded like a voice, high and trembling, calling for help. Ethan stopped, listening carefully, his eyes narrowing. He turned his head toward the sound, his instincts telling him that this was trouble. But there it was again, a cry, weak but desperate. He could not ignore it. He stepped off the main trail, pushing through thick plants. The ground was soft, covered in moss, his boots sinking with each step. The air grew warmer, the smell of damp earth and flowers filling his nose. After a few minutes, he saw movement ahead, a small shape on a broken wooden bridge. The bridge crossed a deep ravine, its ropes frayed and boards missing. And there, clinging to one of the remaining planks, was a young alien girl. She was tiny, no taller than his waist, with silver blue skin that shimmered in the dim light. Her eyes were wide and filled with fear, her small hands gripping the wood so tight her knuckles turned pale. But that was not what made Ethan's pulse race. Below her, on the far side of the ravine, a massive shape moved, a beast six-legged, covered in black fur with sharp bone plates along its back. Its head was low, its golden eyes fixed on the girl. When it opened its mouth, Ethan saw rows of long fangs glistening with saliva. The beast let out a low growl, the kind that made the skin crawl. Ethan's hand went to his pistol, pulling it free. The girl saw him and screamed something in a language he didn't know. The beast turned its head toward him, ears flat, its muscles tensing. It leaped forward onto the broken bridge. Wood snapping under its weight, Ethan aimed and pulled the trigger. The gun clicked, but no shot came. The pistol had jammed. There was no time to fix it. The beast was already halfway. Across the bridge, swaying violently, Ethan dropped the pistol and reached for the long blade strapped to his thigh. The girl's terrified eyes were locked on him, her lips trembling. Ethan stepped forward, planting his feet as the beast lunged. Its claws slashed through the air. Missing him by inches, he swung the blade, the metal cutting into the beast's shoulder. The creature roared in pain and rage, its foul breath washing over him. It swiped at him again, the force almost knocking him backward. He ducked low, stabbing upward into its side. The beast shrieked, twisting and snapping its jaws at his face. Ethan grabbed one of the ropes of the bridge for balance and pulled the blade free. The beast lunged one last time, and Ethan drove the blade deep into its throat. Hot, dark blood sprayed across his arm. The creature gave a choking growl, then collapsed, its body sliding off the bridge into the ravine below. Silence returned to the forest, but Ethan's heart was pounding like a drum. The girl was still holding the plank, her whole body shaking. Ethan moved carefully. Stepping over to her, he knelt and reached out his hand. "It's all right. You're safe now," he said softly, though he wasn't sure she understood his words. She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly placed her small hand in his. Her skin was cool and smooth. He helped her onto solid ground. For a moment, she stood there staring at him, her eyes shining. Then she lowered herself to her knees and bowed her head. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "I belong to you now," she said, her accent heavy, but her meaning clear. Ethan frowned, unsure if she was speaking literally or if it was some kind of custom before he could ask. She looked up at him with an expression that was not just gratitude, but something deeper in her eyes. He saw not just relief, but a strange, unshakable bond, somehow, in this dangerous jungle. Their lives had been tied together, and Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Ethan walked back toward the trail, the alien girl following close behind. He had expected her to run off to wherever her people lived, but she didn't. Her small steps were quick, almost hurried, as if she feared he might leave her behind. "Where is your home?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. She looked at him with her big silver eyes, but didn't answer. Instead, she gripped the strap of his pack like it was a lifeline. Ethan sighed, unsure what to do. They walked in silence for a while. The forest. Sounds slowly returning. Bird-like creatures called from the treetops. And somewhere far away, water splashed. The path ahead curved around a cluster of giant roots, their thick shapes rising higher than Ethan's head. He stopped and turned to face her. "You can't follow me," he said, firmly, pointing back the way they came. Her expression changed, fear, sadness, and something stubborn, all at once. Then she shook her head. "I go with you," she said in broken English, her voice quiet but steady. Ethan studied her for a moment. She looked fragile, but there was a strength in the way she stood. "Why?" he asked. She hesitated, then touched her chest with her small hand. "Life's debt," she said. Ethan remembered hearing about this in briefing reports. Some alien cultures believed that if someone saved your life, you were bound to serve them until the debt was repaid, but he wasn't interested in owning anyone. "I don't want a servant," he said, shaking his head. She tilted her head, confused, "Not servant." She whispered, "Bound," before Ethan could argue. A faint sound reached his ears. A snapping twig. He froze, raising a hand for her to stay quiet. The girl obeyed, her body going still, her eyes scanning the shadows. Ethan stepped forward, carefully, peering into the thick undergrowth. For a moment, nothing moved. Then he saw it, a footprint in the soft dirt. It was fresh, and it wasn't his. It was too wide. With a split toe pattern he didn't recognize, he looked around, the hairs on the back of his neck rising. They were being followed. "Come on," he whispered. Taking her hand and moving faster along the trail, the girl's small fingers clung tightly to his. The forest seemed darker now, the trees closing in. Every sound felt louder. The rustle of leaves, the crunch of twigs, the distant echo of movement behind them. After nearly an hour of steady walking, they reached a small clearing. The sunlight broke through here, lighting up patches of bright green moss. Ethan stopped to rest, dropping his pack to the ground. The girl sat beside him, her knees pulled up to her chest. He glanced at her, noticing how her shoulders shook slightly. "You're cold?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." "Scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. Ethan didn't know what to say. He had been in dangerous situations before, but he always had a plan. Here, he had no plan, only an unknown follower in the shadows. "Who's after you?" he finally asked. She looked down at the moss, avoiding his eyes. "My people," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "Why?" She hesitated for a long moment, then said, "I broke law." Her hands tightened into fists, her small frame tense. "They will kill me," she added softly, before Ethan could ask more. A sudden rustle in the bushes made him stand. His hand went to his pistol, but he still hadn't fixed the jam. The girl's eyes went wide. Staring past him, Ethan turned just in time to see a shadow move fast. Low to the ground, a figure emerged, tall, lean, with pale green skin and long, narrow eyes. It wasn't the beast from before, it was another alien. Wearing dark armor that blended with the jungle, he carried a spear, but his steps were unsteady. Blood stained his side. The alien stumbled forward, collapsing near the edge of the clearing. The girl gasped and ran to him, speaking quickly in Her language, the alien looked at her, then at Ethan, his face tense. They are coming. He rasped in a heavy accent. Hunters. Ethan stepped closer. How many? The alien's eyes darted to the tree line. Too many, he said, coughing. They want her. And they want what she carries. Ethan looked at the girl. Her hands were clenched around something hidden under her clothing. What are you hiding, Shay? He asked. She shook her head, refusing to answer before he could press her. The wounded alien's gaze went sharp. They are here, he whispered. Ethan turned toward the forest and saw movement. Figures stepping out from the shadows, bows in hand, arrows aimed at his chest. The girl moved closer to Ethan, her small frame pressed against his side. Ethan's jaw tightened. Whoever these hunters were, they weren't here for a conversation. The tension in the air was heavy, and Ethan knew the quiet of the forest was about to shatter once again. The hunters stood in a half circle, their bows steady. Their eyes were fixed on Ethan, but every now and then they glanced at the girl. The wounded alien on the ground tried to push himself up, but his strength was gone. Ethan kept his body between the girl and the hunters, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. He didn't speak their language, but he understood their intent. They wanted her, and they wanted her now. One of the hunters stepped forward, his armor decorated with white bone strips. He barked something in their tongue, his voice sharp like a command. The girl pressed closer to Ethan, whispering quickly. He say, "Give me to them, or they kill you." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked around, counting 6 hunters, all armed, all experienced. Running was useless here. The hunter repeated his words, louder this time. Ethan slowly shook his head. The hunters' eyes narrowed, and for a moment, silence fell. Then the sound of movement in the undergrowth, fast and light. The hunters turned their heads. Distracted for a brief second, Ethan seized the moment, grabbing the girl's hand. "Run," he hissed, pulling her toward the far side of the clearing. Arrows sliced through the air, thudding into the trees around them. The girl stumbled, but Ethan yanked her forward, forcing her to keep going. They crashed through the undergrowth, branches scratching at their faces. Behind them, shouts rose, the hunters in pursuit. Ethan's heart pounded, his breath loud in his ears. The jungle was a maze, but he trusted his instincts. He had to lose them in the thickest part. After several minutes of running, they burst into a darker stretch of forest. The canopy above was so dense that barely any light reached the ground. Ethan slowed, listening. The sounds of pursuit were still there, but farther now. The girl leaned against a tree, breathing hard, her silver skin glistening with sweat. "They not stop," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "No, they won't." He replied quietly. He crouched down, studying the ground. The soil here was soft, perfect for leaving prints. Their own tracks were deep and obvious. Anyone could follow them. Ethan's mind worked quickly. "We'll split," he said, pointing toward a patch of thick ferns. He brushed away their footprints with a branch, then led her onto a path of dry roots and stones. It wasn't perfect, but it might slow the hunters as they moved. Ethan noticed something else. Other tracks, fresher than they should be. They were shaped like the hunters' prints, but smaller, lighter, and moving in the opposite direction. Whoever made them was fast, and they weren't running blindly. The girl noticed them too, her eyes narrowing. "These not hunters," she said quietly. Ethan crouched lower, touching the indent in the dirt. "Then who?" They followed the small tracks for a short distance. The prints weaved between trees, staying to the shadows. Then they stopped suddenly at a spot where the earth was disturbed. A pile of leaves covered something beneath. Ethan brushed them, a way to reveal a hidden cache, a small pouch made of tough hide. Inside were strange metal darts and a piece of cloth with symbols burned into it. The girl stared at the cloth, her eyes wide. "This is from my village," she whispered. Ethan realized then they weren't just being hunted by one group. There was someone else. Someone playing a different game in this jungle. Before he could question her, a soft sound drifted through the trees. It wasn't the heavy steps of the hunters. It was lighter, almost like someone creeping. Ethan motioned for the girl to hide behind a fallen log. He moved silently toward the sound, blade ready, from behind a thick tree trunk. A figure appeared, but it wasn't an enemy. It was a young male alien. His skin the same silver blue as the girl's. He froze when he saw Ethan, his eyes wide. "You have her," the young alien said in broken human speech. "She in danger. All of us in danger." Ethan kept his blade lowered, but didn't relax. The girl stepped out from hiding, her voice shaky. "Reen?" She whispered. The boy nodded quickly. "They know. You have Crystal," he said, looking between them nervously. Ethan turned to the girl. "What crystal?" Her hands went to the pouch hidden under her tunic. She pulled out a small object that seemed to glow faintly, even in the dim light. It was smooth, almost like glass, but filled with a swirling light inside. Ethan could feel a strange energy coming from it. The boy stepped closer. Lowering his voice, "They kill for it. Not just hunters, others too." Ethan didn't like the way he said others. The girl looked down, her voice soft. "I take it from Chief. He sell it to off-worlders." Ethan understood now this wasn't just about a runaway girl. It was about something powerful enough to start a war. A sharp snap echoed through the trees. Reen's head jerked toward the sound, his face turning. "Pale, they find us," he whispered. Ethan grabbed the girl's hand again. Pulling her close. "Move," he said. But before they could take more than a few steps, shadows began to shift between the trees. The hunters had found the tracks, and this time they weren't alone. The hunters emerged from the trees like shadows given form. Their armor blended with the jungle. But the glint of their arrowheads caught the faint light. Ethan counted. Quickly, more than before, at least 8 now. And moving with the quiet steps of predators, the girl pressed herself against his side. And Reen crouched low, gripping a short curved blade. The leader stepped forward. The same one with bone strips on his armor. He pointed his bow at Ethan, then at the girl, and barked words that carried a sharp, commanding tone. The girl swallowed. "Hard," he say. "Give me." "Give Crystal," she whispered, her voice barely above the sound of the wind through the leaves. Ethan kept his gaze locked on the leader. "What happens if I refuse?" He asked quietly. She hesitated, then looked down. "They kill you. Then take it anyway." The leader repeated his demand, this time stepping closer. Ethan's blade was already in his hand. His stance firm. Reen muttered something in there language, but the leader only snarled in reply. One of the hunters behind him shifted, and Ethan noticed movement. They were trying to circle around. He stepped sideways, keeping the girl behind him. "I'm not giving her up," Ethan said. In a low, even tone, the girl's hand tightened around his arm. Her silver eyes wide but steady. The leader's gaze hardened. He lowered his bow slightly and spoke again, this time slower. The girl translated in a trembling voice. He say, "She stole. Sacred heart of the tribe. Crystal belongs to the chief. To the ancestors." Her words carried a weight that even Ethan could feel. But then her tone changed, almost bitter. "Chief sell it. To slavers, not to keep it safe." Ethan's grip on his blade tightened. "So they're not protecting it, they're selling it," he muttered. The girl nodded once. Reen stepped forward, his eyes locked on the leader. "She right. Chief is corrupt. Hunters serve him, not the tribe," he said in halting human speech. Ethan understood now. This wasn't a lawful retrieval. It was a power grab. The leader must have sensed the resistance in Ethan's stance. With a sharp shout, he raised his hand. The hunters lifted their bows in unison. Arrows pointed directly at Ethan's chest. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. The air was thick with the smell of damp leaves and the sound of distant creatures calling. Ethan's pulse was steady, his mind already calculating. 8 hunters, close range, terrain dense but not impassable. They had a slim chance if they moved fast. The girl leaned close to him, whispering, "They will shoot." Ethan glanced. "Down at her, then we make sure they miss," he said. He bent his knees slightly, preparing. In the next heartbeat, he reached down, grabbed a handful of dirt and leaves, and flung it toward the leader's face. The man staggered back, cursing. Ethan grabbed the girl's arm and shoved Reen forward. "Run." They darted toward the side where the jungle was thickest. Arrows hissed through the air, striking trees and vines. Ethan ducked low. Feeling one graze past his shoulder, Reen swung his blade, slicing through a vine to block the path behind them. The hunters shouted in frustration, giving chase. The girl clutched the crystal to her chest as if it were her heartbeat. The jungle here was uneven, with sudden drops and thick roots twisting across the ground. Ethan moved with the awareness of someone who had survived more than one ambush. He led them toward a slope covered in moss, sliding down and landing hard. Reen and the girl followed. The sound of pursuit still close. They stumbled into a narrow gully where the walls were slick with moisture. The space was tight. Only 1 or 2 could pass through at a time. Ethan stopped halfway, turning to face the hunters. "This is where we make them stop," he said. Reen nodded, taking position on the other side of the gully entrance. The girl crouched low behind a rock. Clutching the crystal, the first hunter leaped into view. His bow drawn, Ethan lunged forward, knocking the arrow aside and slamming his blade into the man's arm. The hunter cried out, falling back into the others. Reen moved quickly, his blade flashing in the dim light. The narrow space worked in their favor. The hunters couldn't rush them all at once. Still, the fight was brutal. Ethan's arm ached from blocking blows, and his breath came hard and fast. An arrow grazed his side, tearing through his jacket. The leader shouted from behind, urging his men forward. But Ethan and Reen held the choke point, step by bloody step. Finally, after several tense minutes, the hunters began to pull back. Their leader glared at Ethan, pointing to fingers at his own eyes, then at Ethan, a silent promise. This wasn't over when they were gone. Rye. Ethan leaned against the gully wall, catching his breath. Reen wiped his blade clean on the moss. The girl came forward slowly, her expression filled with both fear and determination. "They will come again," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Then we make sure next time we're ready." The crystal glowed faintly in her hands, its light reflecting in her silver eyes. Ethan didn't know exactly what it could do, but he knew one thing for certain. They couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. The gully led them to a clearing deep in the forest. The air was damp and cool here, and the ground was covered with thick moss that softened their steps. Ethan scanned the area, his eyes moving over the remains of metal walls and broken panels. "This used to be a human research outpost," he muttered, recognizing the rusted shapes of supply crates half buried in the earth. It was long abandoned, but it offered something valuable: shelter. "We'll stay here for the night," he said, his voice firm. Reen checked the perimeter, his movements quick but careful. The girl stayed close to Ethan, clutching the glowing crystal. He could see how tightly she held it, as if letting go even for a second would mean losing more than her life. Inside the largest remaining structure, they found a corner with 3 intact walls and a partial roof. Ethan set down his pack and pulled out a small kit. The cut on his side from the arrow wasn't deep, but it stung badly. He sat down heavily. Pulling up his shirt to inspect a wound, the girl's eyes widened. "You hurt," she said softly. Moving closer, "I've had worse," Ethan replied, trying to sound casual. But she knelt beside him anyway, placing the crystal carefully on the ground from a small pouch tied to her waist. She took out herbs and a strip of clean cloth. Her fingers worked quickly, crushing the leaves between her palms until a green paste formed. "This heal fast," she explained in her broken English. Before he could argue, she began applying it gently to the wound. Her hands were cool, and the paste sent a tingling sensation through his skin. Ethan watched her work, noticing the way her brows furrowed in concentration. She wrapped the cloth around his side and tied it firmly. "You learn this from your people?" he asked. She nodded. "My mother. Before she died," she whispered, her voice low. He didn't ask more, sensing the pain behind her words. By the time she finished, Reen had returned. "No tracks close," the boy said, but they searched still. Ethan nodded. "They'll come back, and they'll bring more," he said grimly. The girl picked up the crystal again, holding it close to her chest. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice calm. "You trust me?" She met his gaze and nodded once. "Then tell me, what does it do?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the glowing stone. "It is heart of our sky temple," she said slowly. "It give power to machines, heal plants, water pure." Ethan blinked. That explained why the hunters wanted it. "It's valuable," he said. "More than you think," Reen added quietly. "With it, a leader can rule all tribes." Ethan understood now that protecting her wasn't just about keeping her alive. It was about keeping this crystal out of dangerous hands. As night fell, they built a small fire inside the shelter. The flames danced on the metal walls, casting shifting shadows. Ethan leaned back against the wall, his blade within reach. The girl sat beside him, her knees drawn up. "You saved me twice now," she said suddenly, her voice almost shy. Ethan shrugged. "You don't leave someone to die," he said simply. Her gaze softened. "In my people's way, that mean we are bound, soul to soul." Ethan glanced at her, unsure how to respond. "I don't know about souls," he said, "but I know we're in this together." She smiled faintly, a rare moment of peace in the tension of the day. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the crackle of the fire. Outside, the jungle was alive with distant sounds, creatures calling, leaves shifting, the occasional snap of a branch. Ethan's instincts told him the hunters were still out there, waiting later that night as the fire burned low. Ethan heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned to see the girl placing her blanket over his shoulders. "You cold," she said simply. He smirked slightly. "You should keep it," but she shook her head. "You fight for me." "I keep you warm," she replied, her tone so serious it almost made him laugh. Instead, he nodded his thanks. The bond between them was no longer just survival. It was something deeper. Forged in blood and danger, Ethan had protected her, but now he realized she was protecting him in her own way. When sleep finally came, it was light and uneasy. Ethan kept one hand on his blade and one ear tuned to the forest. And in the shadows beyond the shelter, unseen eyes watched the faint glow of their fire. The hunters were patient, but they weren't the only ones closing in. The first light of dawn crept through the gaps in the rusted walls. Ethan's eyes opened before the sun fully rose, his body already alert. The forest outside was strangely quiet. Too still for morning, he reached for his blade and stood, scanning the tree line through the gap in the wall. Something was wrong. Reen was already awake, crouched near the doorway, his hand gripping his short blade. "They close," he whispered. The girl stirred from sleep, clutching the crystal as if she had been holding it even in her dreams. Ethan motioned for her to stay low. He stepped outside. The damp air, heavy with the smell of rain and earth. That's when he saw its faint movement in the shadows between the trees, dozens of them, more hunters than he had ever seen at once. They were spread out in a wide circle, slowly tightening around the old outpost. Some carried bows, others long spears, and a few had nets slung over their shoulders. The leader with the bone-stripped armor stood at the center, his gaze locked on Ethan, and his voice carried across the clearing. Sharp and cold, the girl stepped. Up beside Ethan, translating in a trembling voice, he say, "No more running. Give me. Or all of us die." Ethan's grip on his blade tightened. "We're not handing you over," he said without looking at her. Her silver eyes shone with both fear and determination. Rean moved to Ethan's other side, his jaw set. "If we fight, we fight together," the boy said. Ethan nodded once. They had no choice. This would be their last stand. Ethan quickly searched the outpost for anything useful. Quotes, broken panels, and rusted scraps of machinery lay scattered. He pulled out wires, metal rods, and scraps of sheet metal. "Help me," he told Rean. They worked fast, setting up crude traps near the entrance, tripwires, sharp stakes hidden in the ground, and a pile of rocks balanced above a doorway. The girl joined them, pulling from her pouch a small powder that burned with smoke when lit. "This blinded them," she said, handing it to Ethan. He gave her a quick nod. They'd need every advantage. The hunters began to close in. Their footsteps, slow but steady. Ethan's heart pounded, but his mind was sharp. He crouched behind the wall, waiting when the first hunter stepped into the entrance. His foot caught a tripwire. A wooden spike swung down from the wall, striking him in the chest and knocking him backward. The others behind him shouted, but pressed forward. Rean leaped from the side, his blade flashing, cutting down one before retreating to cover. Ethan threw the powder into the air and struck a spark. A thick cloud of smoke exploded across the clearing, stinging the eyes and filling the air with a bitter scent. The hunters coughed and shouted. Their formation breaking, Ethan took advantage, charging forward with his blade, striking fast and hard. The girl, though small, moved with surprising speed. She darted between fallen crates, tossing more of the smoke powder toward the hunters. One tried to grab her, but she rolled under his arm and slammed a rock into his knee, making him collapse. The fight became chaos. Arrows hissed through the air, some striking the walls with dull thuds, others whistling past Ethan's head. He blocked a spear strike and countered with a slash across the attacker's arm. Rean fought like someone who knew the stakes, fast, desperate, but skilled. Still, the hunters kept coming. Their leader stepped through the smoke, his bow drawn, an arrow aimed directly at the girl. Ethan saw it too late. He lunged, shoving her aside, the arrow slicing across his shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he stayed on his feet. The leader advanced, drawing a long, curved blade. He and Ethan circled each other, the noise of battle fading in Ethan's focus. The first clash was hard, metal striking metal with a sharp ring. The leader was fast, but Ethan was stronger. They traded blows, each step in the mud sending up splashes. Finally, Ethan feinted left and drove his blade upward into the leader's side. The man staggered back, shock in his eyes, before collapsing to the ground. The hunters froze at the sight, their momentum broken without their leader's command. Their attacks faltered, some began to retreat, fading into the forest shadows. Others dragged the wounded away. In moments, the clearing was silent except for the sound of rain starting to fall. Ethan leaned on his blade, breathing hard. Blood ran down his arm, but he ignored it. The girl rushed to him, her small hands gripping his uninjured side. "You hurt again," she said, her voice tight with worry. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice was hoarse. Rean sheathed his blade, looking around at the quiet forest. "They'll come back," he warned. Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we'll be ready for them." The girl pressed the crystal into Ethan's hands. "You keep safe," she said softly. "You fight for me. I fight for you." Ethan looked at her, the bond between them stronger than ever. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about trust, loyalty, and something neither of them had expected. Asterisk, the rain fell in steady sheets, washing away the blood and footprints from the battle. Ethan sat under the shelter's half-roof, his injured arm resting in a sling made from torn cloth. The fire burned low, its faint orange glow reflecting in the girl's silver eyes as she sat across from him. Reen had gone to check the forest perimeter, leaving them alone in the quiet. For the first time since they met, there was no immediate danger pressing on them. But the weight of everything they had been through hung between them like a heavy shadow. The girl still held the crystal close, its soft light glowing faintly against her skin. She hadn't let it out of her hands even once. Ethan watched her, wondering how someone so small had endured so much. "You should keep moving when you're healed," Ethan said quietly. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "There's a human outpost 2 days from here." He continued, "They can keep you safe." Her grip on the crystal tightened. "No," she said simply. Ethan frowned. "No?" She shook her head slowly. "I stay." "With you," he let out a tired sigh. "Why?" Her gaze didn't waver. "In my people's way, I belong to you now," she said softly. "You save me, you fight for me, you bleed for me, and I choose to stay." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I don't own people," he said. She gave a faint smile. "Not own. Bound." A quiet moment passed, the rain tapping against the metal walls. She leaned forward, placing the crystal in his lap. "You keep this now," she said. Ethan stared at it, the swirling light inside pulsing faintly. "This is your home's heart." He said, "Why give it to me?" Her voice was steady. "Because you will protect it, even if it costs you everything." "I know," Reen returned then, shaking the rain from his hair. "No hunters near," he said. "Forest quiet." "For now?" Ethan nodded. "We should leave at first light," he said. Reen glanced between them, noticing the crystal in Ethan's hands. "You keep it, eh?" Ethan gave a short nod. "If they want it, they'll have to go through me," he said. His voice like stone. That night, they shared what little food they had left. The girl sat close to Ethan, not speaking much, but her presence was steady. When the fire burned low, she shifted closer, resting her head lightly against his uninjured shoulder. "You will leave one day?" she asked quietly. Ethan hesitated before answering, "I don't know. Maybe." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I go too." Sleep came slowly for Ethan. But when it did, it was deep, for the first time in days. He didn't dream of being hunted when he woke. The morning sun was breaking through the clouds. Reen was already awake, sharpening his blade. The girl was outside, standing barefoot in the wet grass, her face turned toward the light. She looked peaceful, almost as if the jungle wasn't filled with danger beyond the trees. Ethan stepped out to join her. "We should move soon," he said. She turned to him, her expression calm but firm. "I ready," she replied. Before they left, she placed her small hand on his chest. "Over his heart, in my people's way." "This mean I give my life to you," she said softly. "Not because of debt. Because I choose." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed his hand gently over hers. "You've got your own life. I'm just making sure you get to live it," he said. Her lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes shone with something deeper. "You don't understand yet. But one day you will," she said. They walked away from the ruined outpost. Heading deeper into the jungle, the ground was soft from the rain, and the air was fresh, carrying the scent of wet leaves and earth. The forest was alive again. Creatures chattered in the trees. Water dripped from branches, and the sun painted gold patterns on the mossy floor, despite the danger that still lingered beyond the trees. The girl walked with her head held higher than before. Ethan noticed it, though he didn't comment as they moved. He kept glancing at her, the way she stayed close, the way her eyes scanned the shadows like she was ready to fight beside him. They weren't just survivor and protector anymore. They were something else. Something bound by every step, every wound, every moment they had fought together by the time the sun was high. They reached a ridge that overlooked the river far below. Ethan stopped to take in the view. The girl stepped beside him, her silver skin catching the sunlight. This world, big. Dangerous, she said softly, but with you? I'm not afraid. Ethan glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Then we'll keep walking, he said, no matter what comes. And as they moved on, the crystals safe in his pack and the bond between them stronger than any vow, Ethan realized that whether he liked it or not, she truly did belong to him now. Not as property, not as a debt, but as someone who had chosen to stand beside him until the very end.